birth pangs of the Enlightenment era kicked in around 1715 and didn't subside until the 19th century. It was during this tumultuous period that the world was introduced to two brand new concepts: manufactured warfare and modern schooling. The person behind modern schooling was a man named Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay, who was, first and foremost, a statist, who, like most rising stars during the 18th and 19th centuries, advocated and fought for the superiority of the state over everybody's favorite scapegoat, the Christian Church. The deranged maestros of the contrived British and French revolutions, who were all members of the occult, employed shock and/or tactics, not only as a means to consolidate their power, but also forcefully reshape people's priorities. If warfare was to become a permanent staple of contemporary life, then that necessitated a concerted effort to seek peace and compromise amidst the chaos. But on whose terms? Yep, you guessed it, the same mob that started the fire. Quick side note. It's no coincidence that after a millennia, a host of ancient and peculiar doctrines re-emerged from nowhere, and that the ideological dissidents who subscribed to them suddenly plucked up the courage to publicly denounce Christianity and convince others that it was too archaic and superstitious to continue, and even launch a successful campaign to usurp power from Christianity. It's also no coincidence that the Christian age was bookended by the death and resurrection of a certain empire. The timing was impeccable, but more on that in the final video of the series. Rest assured, the forces of evil may currently be in power, but they are not in control. While a superficial victory at best, through the means of subversion and the weaponization of the Christian Church against itself, the so-called glorious revolutions managed to compromise systematic Christianity. However, the body of Christianity itself remains relatively unspoiled. The forces of evil may have been allowed their time in the sun, but some things are too big for them to destroy. So instead of destruction, they opted for integration and started the gradual hybridization of dual systems. They retained elements of Christianity that they liked and benefited from, and blended them with Roman republicanism. That's right. The revolutions were the veiled rebirth of the Roman Empire. Have you ever considered what a revolution actually is? It's 360 degrees. A full circle. That's called symbolism. That whole nasty business explains why the once deep and pervasive reverence for God and His commandments was replaced by a deep reverence for man's accomplishments and statutes, and why loyalty to the Church has been replaced by loyalty to the state and a sense of national pride. When Nietzsche said God is dead and we have killed him, it was in reference to the brilliantly crafted, very purposeful and insidious agenda to replace God with Enlightenment thinkers who champion things like logic and democracy, and think that a so-called enlightened few have a duty to orchestrate world events, and even simulate our daily lives, in the interest of a perceived greater good. An agenda that Nietzsche himself, as well as other prominent figures from that period, like Carl Jung, in no small part contributed to. Circling back to Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay, the purpose of modern schooling is perfectly enshrined in his most famous quote, and I quote, "The effect of violent dislike between groups has always created an indifference to the welfare and honor of the state." End quote. Do you see? Problem and solution, cause and effect, divide and conquer. And that's why modern schooling is structured the way it is. The goal, ultimately, isn't to educate, but indoctrinate. Children aren't taught how to think, but what to think. The appeal to authority instinct is instilled into us from early adolescence. Impressionable children are ordered to sit down, shut up, and pay attention, because the teacher has something important to say, and the teacher cannot be questioned because the teacher is never wrong. For all intents and purposes, the teacher is God, and the syllabus is his holy text. Loyalty is coerced from students, thanks to the ever-looming threat of ridicule and contempt, from both their educators and their peers, if they have the audacity to challenge the teacher's authority. In the early days of modern schooling, children were even threatened with psychological torment, in the form of the dunce hat, and physical abuse in the form of the cane, by subjugating a child's will to the authority of an adult who isn't from their immediate family, that conflates, in their mind, their family unit with the state. and that dupes them into believing that some faceless regulatory body requires the same level of respect and obedience as their own parents. Students quickly become the victims of Stockholm Syndrome, and a symbiotic relationship forms between the slave and the system, without the child even realizing. Punctuality, subservience, and brown-nosing, as well as being able to memorize and regurgitate pre-accepted answers for tests, are all rewarded, and thus the child's sense of self-worth becomes inextricably linked to his academic performance. By suppressing natural inquisitiveness early on, educators impress upon students that there's no merit to asking the wrong questions, which only inspires them to stop seeking pleasure in the pursuit of knowledge, and instead seek pleasure in pleasing their taskmasters. Instinct is a powerful thing. It shapes our common sense and provides the framework upon which we can build our sense of discernment. Modern schooling distracts from the importance of honing these basic survival instincts, and that's why so many people lack them. Luckily, though, some children slip through the cracks and manage to survive the school experience with a passive indifference, and even reach adulthood with the understanding that there's no benefit to senseless compliance, and that the system is so obviously rigged against them, designed to clip their wings and tame them. Educators, unsurprisingly, have even found a way to mitigate the influence of these free spirits by, once again, utilizing fear tactics. A child, whose behavior deviates from the accepted standard of the program enough times, is labeled a problem child, and that instills the idea that children who have so-called behavioral difficulties should be regarded as mentally defective. And in the worst cases, children can even become ostracized by their peers. Imagine defending a system that thinks it's okay to plant these ideas in a child's mind, and imagine thinking that such a system is beneficial to a child's development, and even arguing that it prioritizes the child's well-being, and doesn't just mold them for a life of servitude on the workforce. Just imagine. With that said, is it possible for a student to ace their education, become financially secure, and thrive in life? Absolutely. But at what cost? Does their hypothetical success negate the obvious conclusion that education is a scam? That there is a nefarious world within our world that is so clearly based on the widespread manufacture of unwitting consent? A world that's controlled and maintained through schooling. That schooling, as an institution, churns out an army of fresh-faced sycophants each and every year, having only equipped them with the skills and desire to vote for their favorite politicians and pursue a tedious existence in the various fields of wage slavery, and that those same wage slaves jump at any and every opportunity to praise or defend the same system that chewed them up and spat them out? I'll let you decide. From an objective viewpoint, slavery has never looked more lucrative.